Most of the pipe band world in the Northern Hemisphere is settling into its winter competition off-season. Pipers and drummers in New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and other countries are already getting into their summer competitions. Apart from Scotland, there's perhaps nowhere on earth with as many top quality bands and soloists per capita as in New Zealand. Its population of around 5 million supports 5 Grade 1 and 6 Grade 2 bands, each meeting a world standard. The Royal New Zealand Pipe Band Association is the member-driven body that sanctions and manages competitions. Founded in 1928, making it the world's oldest pipe band association, the RNZ-PBA is doing some innovative things. The association's group leader of promotions is 33-year-old Liam Kernaghan, one of the country's top solo pipers and an expert in communications and marketing. We checked in with Liam Kernaghan to see what to look for in New Zealand this competition season.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time actually. So just yesterday was the first kind of kickoff contest for the year at a little rural town called Hororata, which is about 30 minutes west of Christchurch. And the really exciting thing was we had 20 bands there competing on the day, which is pretty big for New Zealand outside of the national championship. And so that really kicks off the 2023-2024 season for us. Early December, we've got sort of our first two major contests. So one again here in Christchurch, and then one sort of colloquially known as Square Day in Palmerston North, where you get to see the first competition for the most of the Grade 1 bands, which is quite exciting. And then, much like everywhere else, everyone has a bit of a holiday for a bit, and the Nationals is in March. So it's going to be quite exciting seeing those Grade 1 bands that have just come back from Scotland compete here at home in New Zealand after their big trip. We've got Hawthorn from Melbourne, who have recently been graded up to Grade 1, coming across for the Nationals. So that'll be 6 Grade 1 bands in the National Championships, which is, excuse me, very exciting. And then also excitingly, we've got about 55 bands entered for the National Championships, which is our biggest entry in a long time, including a record entry for juvenile bands. So things are really looking good in New Zealand. It's a really exciting time to be down under in pipe bands.
We asked Liam Kernaghan for a few of the more exciting and different projects and events that might be happening this competition season.
Yeah, so we've been pretty busy in the last sort of 3 to 4 years, particularly in the promotions and the membership space, trying to get pipe bands out wider into the community in New Zealand, because unlike Scotland, probably it's not as culturally normal here in New Zealand. You know, you sort of see pipe bands walking down the street in Santa parades and university graduation parades, but it's not as culturally normal here. So we've been doing quite a big job of trying to push it out into the mainstream. And one of the really exciting things we've got coming up is for those that were watching the New Zealand bands in Scotland, you will have seen a film crew following them around for the 2 weeks while they were over there competing. And so there'll be a documentary coming out on what it takes for New Zealand bands to make the 12,000-mile journey to Scotland each year or every couple of years to compete. And it's really, I think, two purposes. One is, you know, for New Zealanders to see what it takes and what it's like and what pipe bands are all about, and the sacrifices that our pipers and drummers make to compete on the world stage. But then also for the international pipe band community. I think a lot of people see New Zealand as being quite far away and it's quite a long distance to travel, but actually all of the other bits and pieces that go behind it, you know, your fundraising, the time off work, and the commitment that our men and women have to making the trip. And so really excited about that. It's a really cool piece of work, which is very new for the RNZ PBA and very new for New Zealand pipe bands. We've actually also just recently confirmed that we're holding an RSPBA World Solo Drumming qualifier here in New Zealand next year in June, which is really exciting again for our young up and coming drummers. You know, it's a really good opportunity for them to be able to have a crack at qualifying for the World Solos. You know, last year, for instance, they would have had to travel to the UK or to North America to have a go at it, whereas next year they're going to have an opportunity on home soil, which is really, really exciting. And we've got our annual summer school coming up in January, which is an opportunity to kind of blow the cobwebs off a lot of young pipers and drummers across Australasia. And so that's held in Christchurch again. And we've got some of New Zealand's top tutors coming in for that, which is great. It's always awesome to see young people get really excited after the Christmas holidays and getting the pipes and drums out again. So those are really exciting things that are happening down under. I mean, it's just really exciting time. As I said, you know, we've got a lot of young kids coming in. We've got a record number of juvenile bands entered in the nationals. And so, yeah, it's great. It looks really good for the future.
It's truly remarkable that a country so small, without the direct cultural identity of Scotland, to have such a thriving piping and drumming scene. We asked Kernaghan for possible reasons why that is.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because as I mentioned, it's not something that I guess is culturally normal in New Zealand. You know, we don't have necessarily pipe bands in every town or every city, and so I think there's a couple of things. I mean, the first thing is we're very lucky that some of the really big sort of high schools and colleges in New Zealand have piping and drumming programs which they run and are pretty successful. So you know you think about St Andrews College in Christchurch, you think about Scots College in Wellington, both having dedicated piping and drumming teachers who are teaching 5 days a week, you know, as their full time job, and they're supporting grade one bands right across the country and creating players and building pipers and drummers in an environment where it's part of the school curriculum, it's part of their day to day activity when they go to school, and so that's quite exciting. You've also got for the likes of Invercargill, who through their alcohol licensing trust down south fund piping and drumming tutors to teach the band and to teach learners, and so they've got a big program of learners down there, which feeds, I guess, into that Invercargill machine. And then right across the country, you've got some of our top piping soloists. I think of, you know, Stuart Easton, you know, in Palmerston North, Richard Hawke in Christchurch, Brendan and Meliana Eade in Hamilton, doing a lot of individual teaching as well and supporting the bands across the country. And I think the strength of that learner program right throughout the country, whether it be at schools or in Invercargill in the licensing trust program, we've got a lot of young players coming through who are keen to kind of move and progress through the grades. So we're quite lucky in that respect. And then I think the other part of it is we've always had a very strong tradition of New Zealand soloists going to Scotland and being part of it, and actually bands people too, to be honest, and bringing that tradition home a little bit. So, you know, I think Brian Sutala back in the early 2000s when he was playing with Phil Marshall Montgomery, bringing back what he learnt there, you know, last year we had two drummers playing in Bog Hall, which was really exciting for New Zealand because we haven't had a world champion for a long time. And so them bringing their skills back helps us grow our movement here. And so we're lucky on a lot of fronts, both at that learning and teaching level, but also the fact that our people punch above their weight and compete on the world stage and bring those skills back home.
Because the seasons are reversed, New Zealand will welcome guest pipers and drummers from bands in the Northern Hemisphere to compete with their bands for events like the New Zealand Championships. Players simply have to follow the transfer and registration rules of their home association. It's an open door policy that can be surprising to some.
Yeah, it's something we really, I think, encourage both as the RNZPBA, but also as New Zealanders. I mean, first and foremost, we're always keen to see people come to New Zealand and check out the greatest place on earth. You know, it's a beautiful place, particularly in summer, and you do see, you know, a number of guest players keen to come out and compete at our nationals in March. I mean, but having said, I wouldn't overstate the numbers that end up being guest players in New Zealand. You know, it would be a handful, I would say, at most in most years. And it's mutually beneficial from our perspective. You know, being on the other side of the world, you're not necessarily as close to the action as you'd want to be, and so having guests come in and support and teach bands and help out with what's going on, you know, grows the movement for us. But on the other hand, as well, we've had players from New Zealand go and guest in Scotland. You know, quite a number of us have done it. As I said, we had two players playing in Bog Hall last year. We had players playing in Shots and a number of other bands in Verera as well. And so it works both ways. And for us, we sort of see it as an opportunity to develop our movement at home, but then it also provides an opportunity for, you know, international players to come and get a taste of New Zealand, what it's like down under. And fingers crossed move here, because, you know, ultimately we would love to see more world-class pipers and drummers down under. And then we've also got, we're pretty lucky, I think, in the sense of we've got international players now, particularly from Australia and South Africa, who are making their New Zealand bands now their primary bands. So they'll travel from Cape Town or you know, the far-flung regions of South Africa to come and play in New Zealand bands as their primary band, which is really exciting for us, that we're sort of being looked at as first choice for a lot of these international players. And so yeah, I mean, for us, it's always been something that's been, I guess, a very small part of what we do, because ultimately we've got to make sure that our membership in New Zealand is big and that our bands are supported by domestic players. But we also see it as a really cool development opportunity for up and coming players, as well as some of our top bands, to get advice and support from the best in the business.
As one of the world's top solo pipers, Kernaghan is conscious of the solo piping community in New Zealand and what they're doing on the world stage.
I mean, from a solo piping perspective, I think we had a really solid season in Scotland. We had a number of players over there doing really well, and I think that's supporting and kind of a flow on effect from a lot of that teaching and development work that we do. So Willie Rowe getting second in the gold medal in Inverness, Campbell Wilson winning the BMSR at Inverness, and a number of other players getting prizes throughout the grades, really shows that I think New Zealand's in a great space when it comes to solo piping and pipe bands in general. We were not just delighted with their results, but obviously Canterbury, Manawatu, and Auckland District all performing exceptionally well in the Grade 1 final over those 2 days, and really bodes well, I think, for the future of New Zealand pipe bands. There's always more work to do, but for us, if we can keep having Kiwi bands climbing the ladder slowly and Kiwi soloists kind of reaching the top and being able to compete with their peers really well, when it comes to things like the RNZ Summer School, when players from the Grade 1 bands and some of our top soloists are teaching, they can see that inspiration, firsthand, when the likes of Willie or Campbell or some of our senior leaders in pipe bands are tutoring them, on a daily basis. And so for us, that's a really exciting prospect. And next year, 2024, looks really good. It's not necessarily confirmed yet how many Grade 1 bands will be going across, but certainly there'll always be Kiwi bands and Kiwi soloists in the mix in Scotland, and it's really exciting for us, because it sort of seems to be like there's a bit of a renaissance going in New Zealand pipe bands at the moment. We're going from strength to strength, and I guess the world is our oyster in some respects. So yeah, it's very exciting.